have signed a historic consent decree agreement with the United States Department of Justice.
This has to be more than just words on a page.
I've been talking since 2020. Definitely have to see action.
This process will take time, but it will reap dividends down the line.
Department of Justice is not making decisions for the city of Louisville or LMPD. We are.
We expect that the Louisville Police Department will be a model police department and a shining example of constitutional policing.
And hello, everybody. I'm Doug Proffitt. We want to welcome you to this WHAS11 News special for the next 15 minutes. The federal oversight of the Louisville Metro Police Department, the consent decree you've heard so much about, has been signed and finalized. And WHAS11 News has been bringing you team coverage of this developing story that, if you really had to pinpoint, dates back to the killing of Breonna Taylor, March 13th, 2020. Our reporters covering today's announcement are Travis Breeze and Isaiah Kim Martinez. Isaiah, you covered the news conference. We just heard from Paul Humphrey, the chief, who was part of finalizing this agreement. He was negotiating. He sounded a bit defiant today, pushing back, saying, we're going to be in control of this, not the DOJ. What do you mean by that?
Well, defiant is one word. I would say confident is another. I mean, here is a guy that from the very start said, we are going to do this our way. And these were some of the themes that we heard is we're not going to agree on something that doesn't allow our officers to be able to do their jobs. And we talk about the words handcuffing police. The mayor has used this term. They didn't want excessive requirements of documenting every single stop, whether it be a traffic violation or whatever else it is, to where officers are focusing on that for days on end rather than doing their jobs. But the key here is the leverage that they had. Many of these other cities did not have President-elect Donald Trump coming into office, where really the pressure was put on the DOJ to get this done, and Louisville got to be a little bit more picky on what they agreed on.
Donald Trump sort of in the background, all of this. We're going to talk a little bit more about that because it is sort of a fascinating political development. Travis, you also talked to a man in Baltimore who negotiated their consent decree. This was portrayed today as a great deal for Louisville, one of a kind. Mm-hmm. Is it that? Is that the reality check? What did you learn?
Well, I wanted to start by, as you know, Isaiah's talking about leverage, and it really did, you wonder what it was like in that meeting when they, agreed to the final copy. It kind of seems like the mayor and his team would be like, we got it, and that the DOJ would be like, oh, we had to, concede that, because according to my conversation with Jason Johnson in Baltimore, he said this is the first time he's ever seen what they're calling a 5-year possible out, or a 5-year transfer of the burden, where in most cities that have a consent decree, it's always on the city to say, Department of Justice, we've done enough, but they got it written into theirs that in 5 years, the consent decree will end, and then it's up to the Department of Justice, if they don't think all the conditions have been met, that the DOJ would have to take Louisville to court and say, you guys still need to do X, Y, Z. And it's that transfer of 5 years that's the difference.
Take them to court and prove it, which has never been done to this point.
The burden
shifts, of proof shifts.
Which other cities didn't have.
Right. So that 5-year max is truly historic. I know the city might say a lot of things that we fact check may not be exactly true, but that in itself is unique.
Well, okay, let's talk about the 5 years. You do have a new administration coming in that does not like the Department of Justice and is pro-police. This case, you've learned, is going in front of a Donald Trump appointed judge here in Louisville.
Benjamin Beaton.
Beaton was appointed by the Donald Trump the first time.
And he will be the one to essentially oversee the whole process.
He will.
Right? With the independent monitor who's going to be hired. The mayor didn't rule out that the monitor could be from Louisville, but it's going to be a nationwide search kind of thing. They have their requests for proposals out. But yes, it'll be federal judge, Trump appointed, Benjamin Beaton, who will oversee this, and he'll make the final call of when this ends, essentially.
Could that mean it unwinds earlier than expected?
I think it comes down to the pressure that President-elect Donald Trump's Department of Justice puts on these federal judges. Federal judges are supposed to act independently from what's going on in Washington. We are in for 4 years that we may have never seen before, so we'll have to see. But It's not supposed to tie in. The federal judge is going to act how he sees fit.
Well, let's hear from the woman from the U.S. Department of Justice. She is really focused on Louisville. Assistant U.S. Attorney Kristen Clark was part of the negotiations. She returned to talk about the agreement.
At the end of the process, we expect that the Louisville Police Department will be a model police department and a shining example of constitutional policing.
She expects that to be a model police department. So, Travis, Jason in Baltimore, you know, he has been out there warning cities before they get into this, and he did many months before Louisville got into this. Wait a second, be careful what you agree to. Do you think Louisville, in his mind, did a good job on this negotiation? What was his review?
Jason is someone who, you know, he's a former high-ranking police officer in Baltimore. He has the stance that he thinks consent decrees aren't the answer, that departments don't always need them. And when I started my interview with him today, I said, you know, do you think Louisville got it right? And he said, well, another option could have been that they didn't do it at all. So that was kind of his starting point. And then we talked about the differences in what's actually in here, the key objectives, the policies that need to change, the way that supervisors need to change their frame of mind. He said, all of that is pretty similar to what I've seen in other consent decrees. But he really did think that change in the 5-year burden that we talked about, that is something that is worthy of being talked about. He said, you know, I don't want to take anything away from them. This is a big deal. I've never seen that 5-year possible out. But he does not think Louisville's going to be done in 5 years. So he thinks that the DOJ will have the opportunity to potentially go to court and say you're not done.
That would go to cost. Let's talk about cost. $1.457 million.
Essentially $3 million over the course of 2 years. Yeah.
Over the course of 2 years.
Yeah.
But if it's not done in 5 years, I mean, let's talk about the cost. Is that a realistic cost per year?
I think it's realistic from the monitoring perspective. These independent monitors, Doug, Travis, make a lot of money. I mean, I've been told by some who say they could make upwards of $1-2 million a year.
What do other cities pay for these consent decrees?
I think well, other cities pay $8, $9, $10 million total, but that's not just the monitoring like the city's talking about. That is all the costs for the city itself and its employees to make changes that are outlined in the consent decree. And that's what adds those millions that, by the way, are Louisville taxpayer dollars. That is not, you know, given in a briefcase by the DOJ saying, here, go use this and be better. It is allotted in yearly budgets. So when you look at it there, it's actually the cost is going to be higher, and depending on how long this goes on, that can build up.
I have a question for you, Isaiah. Do you know, does that, you know, 1.45 million, 1.2 million, does that just go to one person, or is that the independent monitor has a team of 4 or 5 people and they split that money?
It could be a team. It could also be costs to get them what they need. So I don't want to imply that that just goes to the monitor themselves and that's it, but it's the monitoring process. As we know, the consent decree is bigger than just monitoring. We assume that Louisville Metro Police have the infrastructure to do a lot of these things, some of which they say they have. But if they have to add infrastructure to be able to implement these reforms, that takes added costs and investment.
Well, we also found out today they are still down 295 positions at
Nearly
Metro Police,
300.
including officers and other staff members.
Yeah.
What did the Baltimore experts say about the cost for Louisville?
He said that there's technology, you know, new technology to maybe new body cameras or something like that. There's a team of people that have to go over these changes, potentially overtime, you know, for the additional time that you have to file more reports and more people have to look at these reports. So, yeah, he did say that there will be additional costs other than the monitor.
Well, the chief, Paul Humphrey, pushed back a bit on the control by the U.S. Department of Justice with the assistant U.S. attorney standing right next to him. Here's what he said.
This is our city. This is our department. The Department of Justice is not making decisions for the city of Louisville or LMPD. We are. The men and women that you see over there on the command staff, myself and Mayor Greenberg, are making decisions for the city.
Under a consent decree, can you recruit officers? Will they even come to want to work to Louisville, especially when you're 300 people down short already?
Well, I've talked with other cities, including New Orleans, and they say initially when that consent decree comes in, that cloud over the department, that a lot of officers cut bait because they say, we don't want to be a part of this. I asked Chief Paul Humphrey, I said, word for word, have you told your officers, stick with us? Are we going to make it through? Are you concerned you could lose some officers? Because that 300 number has essentially stuck there for years. He said, quote, our officers are good. She's made several references. He doesn't even call Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark by name, just says she's made several references to all the things we've done bad. I would not define our department by its worst moments. I like to define people by their best. So when you talk about defiance, Doug, that bite right there, I think, speaks to that more than anything. He's confident.
The body language at the news conference was interesting. You're
Yeah.
right. That was the last word in that news conference when he said that, he's talking all about bad cops, but that's not we're not going to be defined by our worst moment.
Yeah, it's also kind of like why they were talking about, they didn't want to answer questions about Donald Trump, is because Mayor Greenberg was like, this is a Louisville thing. I want to change our police department in Louisville. Yes, we have to do it through a consent decree, but these are things that I've been thinking about, we've been thinking about. We didn't need the Department of Justice to come in and do this. Technically they did, but yeah, that's kind of why they didn't want to answer the Trump questions, is they're trying to make it a Louisville thing that's happening.
That the gallery was full of a lot of Louisville people who have vested interest in that, and some real skepticism on whether this is going to be the dawn of a new day.
I think ultimately, Doug, from folks I've talked to in the community, they are for all the changes that are outlined, but they naturally have a distrust that they're going to see it not just change, but they're worried it might fall back to old habits. Because we talk about sustaining. That's what it comes down to. This consent decree needs to sustain the reforms over many, many years. Some concern is that maybe some of these changes are made. Use of force policy, investigations of sexual misconduct, whatever it may be. But then if it lasts for 2 years and then somehow what they call slippage, is the DOJ's term, falling back to the old habits, that's what they're concerned about. Because ultimately they have seen this department revert back to old ways many, many times in their words. So they'd be concerned to just make sure that doesn't happen again.
Well, let's go back to why this started. The 2-year investigation by the feds actually reached back years before Breonna Taylor was killed in 2020. They found routine examples of civil rights violations against citizens, more against black people than white. Breonna Taylor's mother watched the news conference and told us this.
I pray and I pray some more that we are going to move forward, that we are not going to continue to lose lives to the police. I pray that the police aren't continue to be hurt at the hands of us. It's not a thing to handcuff them. It's simply to ask them to handle all of us with care in a manner that should be handled across the board by everybody.
So Travis, at the news conference, you were asking the assistant U.S. attorney specifically how different Louisville's deal was compared to other cities. You never really got a straight answer from her. What did you uncover?
I mean, that was kind of when, we hadn't read the agreement yet, and I was really concerned about how many total areas of improvement are there. And you brought up that I think in 2023, when the Department of Justice first announced, its findings, that they had identified 36 areas that LMPD needs to improve. Well, after reading through all the different areas of improvement in Louisville's consent decree, I counted 13 distinct areas, and there's 2 different areas that have to deal with search warrants. Baltimore had 17 areas that they needed to improve, and they've only achieved compliance on 5 of their 17 in 8 years. So that just goes
5 in 8 years.
Yes, that just goes to Jason's sentiment that 5 years is not going to be doable.
Can we real quick also touch on Tamika Palmer right
Yes.
there? I mean, when it comes to search warrants, we think of Breonna Taylor. When it comes to search warrants gone wrong, raids gone wrong, part of this consent decree is revising not just the way search warrants are executed once you get there, but how those applications are filed. Remember, a big controversy when the report first came down is what judges are signing off on. Were warrants faulty? These were all questions. So that being revised, these applications, is going to be major for just Tamika Palmer and the rest of the community.
Well, remember the judge who signed off on the Breonna Taylor warrant lost
Mary
her
Shaw,
re-election campaign. We ought to point out that Craig Greenberg was not the mayor when Breonna Taylor was killed. In fact, he was in office 2 months when this investigation came down. He's had to deal with it. Paul Humphrey has been on that police department how many years? I mean, he has experienced a lot of these abuses or seen them. He's now going to correct it. That's his job.
Well, he's somebody who he has not been shy to say that he doesn't agree with the actions of some officers. But what we've heard both him and the mayor consistently say is they believe the majority of officers are doing the right thing. I think the question from some in the community, though, is Chief Paul Humphrey willing to cut bait with officers who don't follow policy? Because he is in that department, hasn't been in that department for 18 years. These are probably some of his longtime friends and colleagues. I think that is the one question when you have someone from Louisville. There's a lot of benefits to people, but that would be the downside.
Of course, he's one of the legacy LMPD families. His half-sister, Yvette Gentry,
was
long
interim
time in the
chief.
police department and interim chief. The final word from you, Travis, on your feeling on, did Louisville really get the best compared to other cities? How is that sort of settling with you from what you heard from the experts today?
I think I would say that there's 200 pages of things that need to change, and then there's 15 to 20 pages of how do we get out of it. And it seems like all of us here today are talking, their city's mostly concerned about how do we get out of it. And it seems like maybe they're not maybe fully realizing how long it's going to take to address those other 200 pages. And I think that's the main concern here.
I think that is a great point. They seem to think 2 years, we're going to be in and out. That simple. Is it that simple? No other city has gotten that.
But let's put reality, and we'll wrap it up with this. There has been 4 years of a lot of talking, but they have implemented programs.
It's true.
They did get ahead of the curve, which is can we say that's one reason why their deal may be a little better than other cities? They brought it up several times today, the Department of Justice.
Well, the Assistant Attorney General confirmed it. She said part of the reason why Louisville is in a better spot, and she even said she's confident they can get out in 5 years or less, is because some of the revisions she was naming kind of rung the bell in our minds. We're like, oh, wait, they've done that. They've done that. They've done that. 911 call deflection, right? Making sure folks who are having behavioral health crisis go to different entities. That's something that they implemented. The Summit Wellness Center for the mental health of officers. These are things the DOJ said they need, and the city has implemented some of those things.
You have an ebb and flow, and then you have a high-profile mistake of an arrest like Scotty Scheffler outside Valhalla, the pro golfer, and his attorney was going to claim civil rights violations. Goes right back to where we are tonight.
And 2 of the officers didn't have their body cams on. At least 2 of them.
More violations.
It's the here we go again. And that is the heart of what the community is concerned about. That's why they want the DOJ to stay as long as possible, I've heard from some folks, is because they're nervous that Louisville cannot self-monitor. And I think that's going to be the ultimate question going down the line.
Did our guy in Baltimore there believe self-monitoring can happen successfully?
I think so. I mean, I think that's the crux of why he believes consent decrees just, slow the wheels and, too many cooks in the kitchen type deal. So I think that's his stance for sure.
Very good. Well, thank you for watching our in-depth look at the historic agreement for Louisville Metro government and the police department. For Isaiah Kim Martinez and Travis Breeze, I'm Doug Proffitt. It's a story we'll be following every step of the way on WHAS 11 News.